Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hitzir,
I'm Isa.
and this week we're going a little different this week. We're not talking about any like super serious artistic art house films or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we are going to be discussing some of our favorite modern teen shows. The main topic, obviously, is a big one. A very popular show on HBO, a dazzlingly provocative show called Euphoria,
hmm
which is both beloved and hated. It's a very divisive show,
Yeah.
as well as a couple of gems on Netflix, such as Mindy Kaling's sweetly poignant "Never Have I Ever."
hmm
And the emotionally and physically insightful Sex Education, alongside a little tiny gem I discovered on BBC Wales way back in the day called In My Skin.
Yep.
And these, I feel, are the shows that are kind of representative. I mean, not thoroughly comprehensive. There are tons of teen shows out there,
Yep.
but I think like these have come to represent or reflect the sort of refreshing openness and frankness that define Gen Z. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely for sure. I think like what we're getting these days with this slate of teen shows feels vastly different from the teen shows that we were getting when we were teens. For
Yeah.
sure.
Speaking of, right, I mean, before we get into Gen Z, right, like,
Yeah.
what were your favorite teen shows of either our generation or the generations prior to us?
Oh man. OC I think was something that in the
Definitive. Yep.
initial first couple of seasons as I followed
Yeah.
quite religiously. To a lesser extent, I think like Joshua Tree, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
91210 was a bit before my time, but
Yeah.
reruns on Channel 5 and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean like I don't know if Seven Heaven really counts actually. But I did
It's
watch that.
it's a Christian teen show. I guess it counts.
Yeah, I did watch a fair bit of that since it was approved by the parentals.
Yeah.
Yeah, strangely enough. But yeah, I think like there were quite a few. But those kind of stand out if we're talking about like early teen years,
Mm-hmm.
especially like I think OC, which I feel was kind of the show that introduced a lot of music to me. Right, like
Mm-hmm.
things like
Mm-hmm.
Phantom Planet and all of that, and like just in general, their soundtrack, kind of like influenced, not influenced, like expanded my music taste a fair bit
Yeah.
during that age.
Walkman, Modest Mouse, etc. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, like very infamously, Imogen Heap, and a very famous scene featuring Marissa. We'll
Yeah.
not get into that now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like that's the point where the OC jumped the ship. Uh, for me, I guess my generation is a bit. I mean, the same as yours, lah, obviously.
Yeah.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a big one.
Yeah, for sure.
When I was slightly older, Friday Night Lights was a big one as well for
Oh
me.
yes.
Clear Eyes, Full Hearts Can't Lose. And prior to that, I think like when I was younger, like primary school, so it's not technically my generation, but Freaks and Geeks and My So Called Life
Oh yeah.
were very definitive 90s
Yeah. Yeah.
teen shows.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And I still think that My So Called Life and Freaks and Geeks still holds up to the Gen Z shows,
Yeah.
And in fact are prototypical of them.
For sure. For sure. I mean, like I think the form of it has changed, but the spirit of it is still kind of the same.
Yeah,
Interestingly
yeah.
enough, I think a lot of the CW shows that are coming out right now are more derivative of those 90s, early noughts teen
Mm-hmm.
shows than anything else we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I know a bunch of you are pissed off because I never mentioned One Tree Hill, but One Tree Hill is a garbage show. Fight me on.
They will, like it has a very ardent fan base from what I understand.
Get on Live Journal because that's a One Tree Hill thing. Get on Live Journal and fight me on
Yeah.
my old LJ. Yeah, yeah. Anyways, let's get into the Gen Z teen shows.
Yep.
Clearly, of course, we are not part of Generation Z. We are millennials, or towards the latter part of Gen X, or early millennials, shall we say.
hmm
So perhaps we cannot relate to everything that Gen Z goes through, but I think these four shows probably shed some insights into that.
Yeah.
And I think they do it really well. With particular, let's begin with HBO's Euphoria, which is an
Mm.
American HBO teen drama created and written by Sam Levinson, who is the son of Barry Levinson. And it's actually kind of based on an Israeli miniseries of the same name,
Oh, really?
created by Ron Lancham. Yeah, so it was originally an Israeli series featuring Israeli teens. It was adapted into America. The American version is far superior. I've seen the Israeli version, which is not bad,
Okay.
but the American version is how it came to be, lah. Also, famously produced by Drake. Very
Yes.
importantly,
Yep.
there's another rapper producer who I forgot.
Future.
But Future, yes,
Yeah.
Drake and Future
Mm,
produced this.
yeah. Yeah, I think the first episode that I saw when I saw the credits, I was like, really? Drake and
Mm-hmm.
Future? Such an unlikely pairing to be featured on something like Euphoria. But I get
Mm-hmm.
it. I get it. Like I think like with the whole kind of vibe and everything that's going on and just like the very like spot on eclectic music choices that they have here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
not at all surprised that they're, executive producers.
Yes. So coming into Euphoria, which debuted in 2019, I was very mixed on it at first. If you actually kind of like look up some of my reviews on Potwire or
Mm.
whatnot, I was not like overly enamored with it in the first half of the season.
Yep.
When I included it in my picks for best shows of the month lah.
Mm-hmm.
I said that I liked it, but I had some reservations about it. And at that point, I had only seen I guess the first three episodes.
Yep.
And I'm gonna like talk you through my thought process about how I came to like not like it and then kind of like it and then loved it.
Yeah.
At first, I kind of figured that Euphoria was like Gen Z skins, you know.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, like skins is, as I mentioned, one of my I didn't mention it, but like it is one of my most influential teen shows growing up.
Yeah.
But skins, like the older I get and the more I look back at skins, and to be honest, only season one was really good. Like I felt like skins was more exploitative than educational to the
Mm-hmm.
millennial generation.
Yep.
It showcased a lot of the drug use and the club scene and the drinking and all of that, but not in a way that educated you or enlightened you about the problems facing the teens, but
Yeah.
more so glamorized it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my fear going into Euphoria was that Euphoria was going to be the same thing.
Yep.
US skins. Well, there is the US skins, but like
Oh
US
man,
skins
like let's
part
not.
part two.
Yeah.
Yeah, like US skins. So I was afraid about that.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain instances, especially in the beginning, where I thought, oh, I don't know, like this might be exploitative,
Yeah.
and not wishing to say anything. But then, as the more I watched it, the more I loved it. The more I came to realize that it did have things to say, and didn't just glamorize it, or in the moments where it glamorized certain things,
Yeah.
it's only done to show the appeal of them, or to use those like drug abuse or sex or drinking as escapism,
Mm-hmm.
to and use it as a doorway to talk about the more not just the symptoms but the root causes of millennial or Gen Z nihilism.
Yeah.
What's going on in society that have made the teens this way, how they were raised that made them this way, things like that. So the more I delved into the show, the more I grew to love it.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, when I've seen the two special episodes, I'm firmly convinced that Sam Levinson actually has some really thoughtful things to say,
Yeah.
alongside the more dazzling aspects of Euphoria, which has caught the eye immediately. Obviously, but camera work,
Mm.
some of the most inventive and dazzling camera work that I've ever seen on a TV show
Absolutely.
ever. The colors, the lighting, the cinematography, the music, and all very eye catching at first, but those were aesthetic things.
Yeah.
But when you delve into the meat of Euphoria, there was a lot of meat in here,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
coupled by tons of great performances, and which is why I feel that Euphoria is the defining Gen Z series,
Yeah.
of today.
For
Yeah.
sure. I find it hard to disagree with that. For sure. I just think like it's a melting pot of so many good things, right?
Mm-hmm,
And to have the kind of like meatiness of the issues that they're trying to explore, not always providing answers. I think like some of the things that they do kind of like point out and things like that aren't necessarily answerable at this point in time, at
mm-hmm,
least. But like just so many good things with that. Like it's easy to be caught up with the love or the hate that is shown online.
mm-hmm,
And like obviously the aesthetics are on point. And always like very fitting, right? The music's always fitting,
mm-hmm,
the visuals always fitting, the everything that they are they nail so many things on the head, you know.
mm-hmm,
But to pair that with such substance, and that's not
mm-hmm,
to say any of the other things that we are talking about this episode don't have substance, but like
mm-hmm,
Euphoria is just like head and shoulders at the moment.
mm-hmm,
With the two special episodes, in effect, they're proving to everyone that like there is a lot more
Mm-hmm.
behind just what we've seen in the first season. There's a lot more where that came from in terms of like the meatiness of it, the pathos that is constructed from the character struggles. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
so little to complain about, and so many things to just like um enjoy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like naturally, though, like with a show seeking to be so generation defining, specifically a generation that is already quite divisive,
Mm.
your mileage will vary, lah. But it is fascinating to see the often generational divide between fans and critics of the show.
Yeah.
And if there were any worries about HBO kind of losing relevancy after Game of Thrones, shows like Succession, shows like Euphoria, shows like Barry have shown like while they may not be the huge hits that GOT were, quality is still coming out of HBO.
Yeah, for sure.
By far the best track record in terms of any network out there, lah.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone of the older end of Gen Z towards I'm more of a millennial, lah.
Yep.
And I kind of fall in line with the former, lah, meaning that I love the show, from its opening minutes. Maybe I wasn't totally captivated, but
Yep.
what did catch my eye and totally enraptured me was the Euphoria's whirlwind storytelling. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it's quite naturally a soap opera. All teen shows are soap operas, so I don't hold it against it.
Yeah, for sure.
But the stunning craft with which the soap opera storytelling is told, the keen devotion to fully realizing the complicated inner and outer lives of today's teenagers.
Yep.
There's a lot of ground to cover when unraveling a world as unexplored and as complicated as this one,
Mm-hmm.
particularly with the advent of social media and everything. But I think showrunner Sam Levinson navigates it with a surprising skill. I
Yep.
mean, Rue is by and large the story's main protagonist, and her
Mm.
story definitely walks the tightrope of delivering a nuanced take on teenage drug addiction
Yep.
that doesn't glamorize the phenomenon but shows the often brutal realities without, as I mentioned, losing sight of why those realities seem so appealing to a character, a nihilistic character like this, who's seeking to escape her anxiety and her troubled home life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a grounded and remarkable central performance from Zendaya, who at that time was breaking free from her Disney Channel past,
Yep.
in an astonishingly well realized turn that never hits a false note for me. Whether she's delivering a lecture
Mm-hmm.
about the art of taking dick pics,
Yep.
or having a truly heartbreaking meltdown in front of a drug dealer's door when her drug dealer refuses to sell her any more drugs.
Mm-hmm.
She covers the whole gamut here, and it establishes her as one of today's finest young talents, to the point where I felt, like towards the end, right, I was starting to think that Zendaya has one other talent that the show hasn't tapped. She's a great singer,
Mm.
and then with a very divisive finale musical sequence also.
Yep.
They use that as well. So I mean, like, it taps all her talents, and she's so great. She's so much more than MJ in Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, like, I've been so taken by her performance. It's insane to kind of like think about what she's done with this particular season, as opposed to her entire other body of work, right?
Hmm.
I think a part of me was a bit hesitant, or rather, I had reservations about the fact that she got casted in Dune, right? Among the
Mm.
whole slate of like amazing actors that they have been casted, but
But this was before you watched Euphoria,
and
lah.
this was before I watched Euphoria, right?
Mhm.
I'm completely sold, right? Like, to be able to show that depth, and how young she still is, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'm expecting great things from her. I'm expecting great things from another season from her. Just as like the central character, she carries a lot of things, and that is not to say that any of the other performances are weak. They are extremely good.
Mhm.
But she's still like really, really, every time she's on screen, every time she has a line, like, it's just like spot on, right? Like, almost
Mhm.
flawless. There's very little you can actually complain about at all.
Yeah, yeah. As you mentioned, like, the entire cast is very strong.
Mm.
One of the strongest elements of the show, besides Zendaya's performance, is Rue's relationship with Jules,
Yep.
played by Hunter Schafer.
Mm-hmm.
She kind of plays this enchanting new transgender girl who comes into town and quickly becomes best friends with Rue. And
Yep.
Schafer is no doubt the breakthrough performance of the season, because people know
Mm.
Zendaya, but people don't know who Hunter Schafer is.
Yep.
And she proves to be a magnetic screen presence, and bolstered by how genuinely exciting it is to see representation like this, and
Mm-hmm.
her presence here feels like a truly progressive step towards trans representation in mainstream American media, at least.
Yep.
And I think like the drug addiction and trans representations alone are important enough topics for a show to to be based entirely around. But Euphoria has so much else on its mind,
Mm.
including weight and body image, technology, the digital landscapes, abusive relationships, difficult and overbearing parents, specifically with Nate, toxic ideals of masculinity,
Yeah.
and so on. And nothing feels like it's included just for lip service. All of those areas are realized with sensitivity and honesty
Mm-hmm.
that's true to the characters that they relate to. Euphoria maintains a constant feeling that it understands these young people, and it nails a specific brand of nihilism and aimlessness that goes beyond angst and comes from a real place of confusion and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in a world that boomers have ruined, it's this feeling that keeps the show compelling when the plot lines themselves may grow a bit too heightened or soap opera ludicrous. It is the
Mm-hmm.
performances that ground them, and the fully realized characters that ground them.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I do. Okay, so when I first started watching Euphoria, right, I was just like, oh, what's that show with Anne Hathaway? Same vibes. Havoc. Is it Havoc? Yes, Havoc. And I was like, oh, this kind of feels like Havoc. And of course, like Havoc was quite some time ago.
Mm.
But like initially, that's what I felt like. But it really became its own monster as it continued to grow. I think like really in episode 4 onwards, that's when things really hit its stride.
Yeah.
So I totally understand, how your initial review and that just walking us through that whole process of falling in love with the show.
Mm-hmm.
I totally get it, but for me, of obviously having only caught up recently, that whole process is far more compressed,
Mm.
for sure.
Yeah, because I was watching it week to week, so I had to
Mm.
like I had the space to breathe and change my opinions in real time.
Yeah, yeah, mine was a bit more of a roller coaster, I think, like
Yeah.
over the last 2 weeks preparing for this episode. Man, there's a lot of team drama to cover in 2 weeks.
A lot
Uh
of teen drama. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, we're older, but we sometimes forget that those years of your lives, it is filled with drama,
Yeah,
all the time because
yeah.
of hormones, and all that. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so easy to forget, I think,
Mm-hmm.
as adults right now. Even though it's weird to say adults, but it's so easy to forget how amplified everything feels
Mm-hmm.
during those years, and just like how much of a struggle it was, right? Like genuinely your teenage years are a struggle in whatever kind of situation you find yourself in. And just kind of revisiting these 4 shows and
Mm-hmm.
seeing familiar situations played out in a different generation is
Yeah.
kind of interesting and eye-opening, right? Because like there are a lot of universal themes that they explore and questions that are asked that may have kind of like different answers to that,
Mm-hmm.
or rather like provide different answers, or rather there are different answers today than they were in our time, but
Mm.
it's easy to forget, right, that the teen years were tough. Everything seemed amplified, everything seemed important, everything seemed dire in that senses. But um I think like catching up on these 4 shows, Euphoria in particular, really drives home the point that at the end of the day, that is part of the human experience for that portion of your life. And even
Mm.
though now as adults a lot of these things seem a lot simpler, which they aren't,
Yep.
um definitely it is, part of the growing and part of the learning and all of that. It's tough. I think being Gen Z gets a lot of flack these days, especially
Mm-hmm.
from boomers and even from elder millennials like ourselves. But
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. It really, really is hard. Like our own millennial struggle,
Mm-hmm.
as being like this transitionary generation moving from the analog into technology.
Yeah.
It was tough enough as it is, but like watching kids grow in an era where the internet is king is
Mm-hmm.
scary. It's scary as fuck, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, looking into like stuff like I guess like cats,
Oh yeah.
perhaps misguided embrace of a body image, which is both positive and negative in many ways.
Yeah.
Especially when she decides to be a cam girl, which in itself is hilarious. Also, man, I do have to mention like one little small little plot line that became super controversial online,
Yeah.
and you probably weren't aware of this back in 2019, but in one of the storylines, Kat used to be a Tumblr fanfic writer, and
Yes.
then she they animated this entire sequence about a One Direction gay plotline fanfic thing,
Yep. Yep.
and like One Direction did not like it. Oh my god, it got so
Oh
much
man.
flack from like Harry Styles and all of that, but I loved it. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah.
that was like kind of like a solid kind of introduction to Kat's character, right? And just like her
Hmm.
evolution as a growing woman.
Yeah.
From the body positive, no, a belief that she gains, and going
Mhm.
to sex work and all of that. Like,
Mhm.
it's fascinating. Like, and that's what I love about Euphoria, right? Like, it takes the time to develop the supporting characters, right? Just as much as we follow Rue's kind of journey through
Mhm.
everything, and it really kind of helps. I do like the format where Rue's voiceover like kind of gives this whole like background and like how things develop.
Mhm.
Much like what's the analogy he uses?
Unreliable narrator.
I'm like Morgan Freeman in the
Oh,
in the third
right.
act of the movie. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I fucking love that. I really felt like that really helped a lot, like in the moments of drama between the characters itself, or even like they
Mhm.
really heated up. Like, for example, all the girls sitting down at the end of the season at prom at the table.
Mm.
Damn,
Yep, yep,
son, like
yep.
nothing's being said, right? But with everything that the audience is kind of privy to that's happened, it's just like, damn, that's got to be a tough sit down.
Yeah. Euphoria is also famous for creating what I feel like, and I watch a ton of shows, right? To be like the worst villain I've ever
Oh,
seen on a TV show. It's a Nate, played wonderfully, by the way, by
yep,
Jacob Elordi, who's, I'm sure, a great guy in real life, but,
yep,
he plays this big, bad jock character, and he's infinitely compelling and infinitely watchable
yep.
while being like the most despicable
Oh,
person I've
yeah.
ever
Fuck,
seen.
fuck Nick Jacob. Seriously.
Yeah. I
It
mean, great villain though. Great
no,
villain. I loved him.
it's an
Yeah.
exceptional performance, and like
Yeah.
at all, I was convinced at every point of the way.
Yeah.
Before every heel turn that he makes, right? At every point
Hmm.
of the way that he could possibly be good, I was totally
Yeah.
sold on that, right?
Yeah.
And that speaks to just like how amazing an actor he is and how he
Hmm.
sells those lines. Damn, like totally convinced. And most of the time, like you don't get that kind of writing, right?
Yeah.
You don't expect the kind of writing from teen shows, right? Like it's a bit more clear cut. Sure, you want to humanize the villains and all of that, but this is like very genuinely like vile, right? Like that
Mm.
distaste in your mouth is palpable and visceral. At least it
Hmm.
was for me. But man, what an amazing performance! Just all in all, like how do you? I don't know. Like you recently, a lot of like toxic fandom stuff going on. People sending our new Captain America like death threats and stuff. Like I would save my
Hmm.
death threats for Nate Jacobs, man.
Oh yeah,
If
definitely.
that was right.
Yeah. But by
Not.
the way, like Wyatt Russell has handled that really well. He
I think
says
so.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, he understands pro wrestling. He says that this is the point. The point of the character is to get death threats and to get people riled up. So I'm doing
Yep.
my job. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. But still, I mean, we haven't seen, but we're in episode 3 right now. Like we haven't
yeah.
really seen him. Like I don't think we've seen the full heel turn yet, right?
Hmm.
And that's gonna continue on. But like, man, as of right now, just because I've
Yeah,
just finished Euphoria, fuck Nick
yeah.
Jacobs, man. Seriously.
Nate should have been the new Captain America. My
Oh
God,
yeah, I mean he definitely looks the part. That
he
is
has the
what
chin for it,
he's
right?
got the
Yeah.
chin for it. He's one gorgeous looking man, but hell, ugh, my god.
Yeah, he is basically like a Patrick Bateman in high school. Like a bit of American Psycho
Mm,
origin story. It really really good. I really like the performance by his dad. I forgot his name, but he plays McSteamy in Grey's Anatomy.
yeah.
Yeah, his dad is really cool and a bit
Uh,
more complex than I initially thought that
Eric
he was
Dane,
going to be.
Eric.
Eric Dane, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Yeah,
Like
but but when I say McSteamy, you all know who I'm talking about,
of
lah.
course, I'm pretty sure a lot of our audience are hardcore Grey's Anatomy fans.
Yeah,
Yeah. I really like Carol's character. I
yeah.
think there was so much in the beginning that they set up for him to be kind of like the main villain, right? Like the main kind of antagonist
Mm,
of the show, and how that kind of like switched its head to his son being it.
mm,
Um, Very clever, I think, right? Like
mm,
kind of very clever, kind of very human in a lot of ways that I didn't expect it for me to kind of sympathize with him halfway through.
mm-hmm.
But the Jacob family is just like toxic as fuck.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
double twist in the carnival episode. Spoiler alert: the double twist in the carnival
Oh,
episode where
yeah.
Cal is the one who actually respectfully approaches Hunter Schafer's character
Yep.
Jules, and says that he means her no harm.
Mm.
When the entire episode was building this like incredible amount of suspense into what will happen when he confronts her.
Yep.
Is he gonna physically assault her or something? And he ends up actually being very respectful and begging her.
Yeah.
Whereas it's Nate who actually we thought like might be actually it's kind of secretly gay, and he might actually have feelings for Jules, but he turns it around, with that
Yeah.
with that heel turn. Great, that was the episode that made me fall in love with the show.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that was like kind of like peak storytelling, right? Like
Mhm.
I didn't expect that to happen. The heel turn that took place in there, it was crazy. The double twist was crazy. Like Nate is such a complex character. Once you get past your like absolute disgust for him,
Yeah.
and I mean like they definitely like laid that out, right? Like there's a lot of like self-hatred that goes on when it comes to trying to work out your sexuality or coming to terms with your sexuality.
Hmm.
And like his relationship with Maddie and Jules is just
Mm.
like, oh my god, really? But as the girls mentioned, there's a high possibility they'll get married and divorced 3 times over. But
Yeah.
for sure, like how do you not be taken by the way that episode spins?
Hmm.
It's so difficult to not be wowed by that. I remember very clearly, like I definitely binged like the second half of the season.
Hmm.
But after that episode, I needed a breather, man. I was like,
Mm.
really? What the fuck just happened here?
Yeah.
But like so good, so good.
Yeah, exceptionally tense. That episode actually featured like some of the best camera work of the show, which goes to say something.
Mm.
The way the camera feels like a single take. Zipping around the carnival. Going up and down the Ferris wheel, following different characters. It's pretty insane. And it's difficult to be too annoyed at a show that is so brazen to go for broke. With its
Yeah.
ambitious technical elements.
Mm-hmm,
Like
mm-hmm,
oh, every episode opens with an extended segment delving into the backstory of a supporting character, which I like
mm-hmm.
through montages that are beautifully cut, thrillingly realized. And then, as I mentioned, the camera frequently adopts this very like Scorsese like frenetic, coked out
Yeah.
energy,
Mm-hmm,
whipping
mm-hmm.
around and flying through scenes with reckless abandon. It's truly exhilarating.
Yeah.
Like I first noticed what I was in for, in the first episode when Rue snorts a line in a bathroom, and then the camera does this, inception trick with her
Mm.
walking around the party to Jamie XX's good time.
Yep.
That
Yep.
was great. Like more than anything else on air right now, Euphoria actually, like, I keep the files on my computer so I could rewind specific scenes to
Mm.
watch the instances of camera work.
Yeah.
And accompanied by the absolutely perfect needle drop. A lot of very rewatchable stuff in here.
Fantastic stuff. Like you mentioned, right? A lot of like Scorsese like camera work, but at the same time, not afraid to kind of delve into like these vaporwave kind of moments, right? With the
Yep.
lights and like long single frame takes of like close up of eyes and things like that. I think a lot of the trips within the visual trips within the story itself are just like breathtaking to watch, and the way that it's edited and cut is like tempo perfect. Like
Hmm.
I don't have any complaints, and like for those of you that have been listening for us a while, like pacing is a big deal for me. A lot of the time
Mm.
it like takes me out of the story and ruins my general enjoyment. Like I got no complaints about that. Just being
Hmm.
able to vary the tempo so masterfully is top just top stuff. Yeah.
I agree, but at the same time, also, I do realize some of the complaints out there that say Euphoria may be too flashy. You know,
Okay.
it may be a bit too spectacular. Spectacular. I mean, everybody recognizes the incredible craftsmanship,
Mm.
and where the craftsmanship combined with the tawny, brutally honest subject matter and astonishing young performances.
Yep.
It kind of elevates Euphoria, but a lot of people feel like some of the shows like hype and fandom is based just on the flashiness,
Okay.
which I can understand.
Yeah.
Which is why right now, like, I kind of want to transition to the COVID episodes of Euphoria, the special
Oh
episodes.
yeah.
Specifically with the Rule episode,
Mm.
in beginning episode one,
Yep.
Trouble Don't Always Last. This is where the show proved to you under COVID restrictions, where it couldn't have a big cast,
Mm-hmm.
that it could do just a meat and potatoes dialogue driven uh episode with just like Rue and her sponsor, Domingo Coleman,
Ali.
sitting in
Yeah.
a yeah, Ali is sitting in a diner having a conversation about everything from race to religion,
Mm,
to addiction, and have it be just as compelling, if not more compelling, than the entire series combined.
I agree.
Uh, like
I,
what do you think about like that, especially part one of the special episodes, because I feel like it really elevated Euphoria to a level and addressed all the criticisms at the same time.
yeah. So remove all of the things that we've been ranting and raving about, right? Just like
Yeah.
pure meat on a platter, like steak, well done. Like I mean, not well done. You get what I mean, but like steak on a plate.
Yep.
Meat and potatoes, just straight up a 1 hour conversation, right? More or less
Mm-hmm.
between two people. An outstanding performance, entirely believable. Uh, I found myself entranced in a way that I did not think I would be with a series like that. You come in with the expectation, right? Like, oh, okay, this is what Euphoria looks like. This is what it sounds like. This is what I can expect from it. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of high and lows, but to have such a keen kind of middle ground where it's two people talking, right? And like um the kind of explorations that they have, the kind of wisdom that is shared, the kind of like sound bites that I think will be shared on for a generation to come. Just it is extremely compelling work that you cannot deny, no matter whether you've been a fan or whether you've been a critic of the first season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to have it as, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a throwaway episode, but this isn't even part of season two,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to be able to do that with a presentation that is so subtle and that is so tempered. I mean,
Yeah.
like I was totally sold, right? Like I'm so excited to see what they will do in season two. I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if there will be a bit more of a balance between what we saw in that special episode and in vis-a-vis season one. Because I
Yeah.
would love for that to happen, right? For us to be able to get like both our cake and eat it.
Mm.
Just with the combination of the two, I mean, I would be totally blown away by that.
Yeah, yeah, like when people think of Euphoria, you think of like the neon lights, the glitter smeared across bleary eyes, the
Yeah.
dizzying camera work, and all, they all like do a good job in portraying the disorientation that teenagers feel, the mania of it,
Yep.
but like at the same time, like Euphoria can sometimes be completely overwhelming, kind of throwing too much at its audience at once,
Hmm.
and daring it to blink, and Trouble Don't Always Last like does none of this, it's great. It's pared down, almost like Before Sunrise esque.
Mm.
Set in the aftermath of Rue's relapse, she joins the sponsor Ali at a dinner on Christmas Eve, which is sad by itself, But the topics they discuss, the naturalism of the dialogue, the depth of the conversation,
Oh, so good.
and when you take away all of the histrionics of everything else,
Yeah.
just from a practical standpoint, this extremely austere episode and script. I mean, I get that it wasn't necessary because it was filmed in the height of the COVID pandemic,
Hmm.
But I think like Sam Levinson and Zendaya kind of just wanted to prove a point,
Yeah.
Like you think you know the show, but
No.
we can do other things too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just say that Coleman Domingo's voice is amazing?
Oh yeah, yeah, great voice. I could hear him talk all
Yeah,
the time.
like
Yeah.
seriously, that and like Zendaya's completely believable conversation while high performance
Mm-hmm.
is just like them. I really, really love this episode. I think if it were up to me to introduce a single episode to anybody who's keen to get into Euphoria, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend this, right? Like sans everything else, right? The aesthetics, sans the needle drops and all of that. If
Mm-hmm.
they wanted a idea of what Euphoria is and could possibly be, I would definitely show them this episode over anything else.
Yeah, yeah, and you were saying like having our cake and eating it too. I feel like they struck a balance in an episode that they filmed a few months after Rue's episode.
Yeah.
Focusing on Jules is a Euphoria special part two.
Hmm.
This time it's kind of similar to Rules. To Jules. Rules is the ship name. Sorry. To Rue and Ali's conversation. This time though, it's just a therapy session between Jules and a therapist,
Yeah.
and this one they go deeper into her past, the problems,
Hmm.
the secret that she's been hiding from Rue, which fills in so many blanks from season one,
Yep.
questions that I had,
Hmm.
and it's more to do with gender, body dysmorphia, and things like that. Obviously, more specified to Jules's point of view, being a
Yep.
transgender woman,
Hmm.
than Rose's, which was more on drug addiction. But I think this kind of struck the balance between the Rue episode and Euphoria season one, because this one
Hmm.
had some of the the gorgeous kind of abstract camera work
Yep.
and the visual montages and stuff like that, while at the same time incorporating the very heavy dialogue driven character work of Rue's episode. Like, and this I feel is like the Jules episode feels like what Euphoria can be in season two,
Yeah, for
pairing
sure.
both.
Hmm.
And also be like huge credit to Hunter Schafer who wrote this episode as well.
Yeah, amazing stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel that was Hunter Schafer's personal kind of response
Yep.
to the criticism that the Jules character got, right? Because like we don't get we don't get any of her internal dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
internal monologuing rather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like so many questions about like why she does the things she does, and what drives her and all of that. Like sure, we dive into some of that, especially in her own like personal montage introduction,
Yep.
but like nothing at this kind of level, right? And to be able to have a special episode like that to wrap up her character arc for season one, just
Mm-hmm.
explaining, not away, but like just explaining a lot of the reasons things were done, personal motivations and feelings behind that. Like
Mm-hmm.
what a way to kind of like tie loose ends before going into a second season. That's kind of
Indeed,
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of already understood why Jules was suddenly averse to Rue. Like being responsible for someone's sobriety is a heavy thing.
Yeah.
Like a relationship should be give and take. You should be having fun. Not be worrying that if I make a mistake, my partner is gonna go off the deep end and be an addict again.
Yep.
It's a lot of responsibility, and then pair that, with now you have the additional backstory of a mom being an addict as well.
Hmm.
I totally understand where Jules is coming from, and plus, she has her own shit to deal with. Like being
Yep.
a trans woman, it's not easy, lah.
Hmm.
Not easy in 2021, and not easy for any time in history.
Yep.
And Hunter Schafer did a good job in encapsulating that point of view. And these two special episodes, I do have to point out, do make a distinction. Clearly that Jules is an unreliable narrator, which she herself
Oh
said in
yeah.
episode one.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
the whole story with them getting the rules tattoo on their lips, apparently did not happen.
Yep.
So how much of the show is taking place in is exaggerated or embellished by Rue, and how much is not. So it's interesting too, lah. And to be honest, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, but it makes me interested, lah,
Yeah,
to see how it
for
unfolds.
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I think like not just the whole idea of either one of them actually being unreliable narrators.
Yep.
I think in particular the Jules episode mixes up the timeline significantly, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
brings a lot of past things into the forefront of her mind. And especially with the whole shy guy, the whole shy guy sequence as
Yep.
well. Like, and like it's so fascinating to see, like that's a lot closer, right, to what the human mind is right? Like in
Yeah.
our understanding of time, like we don't always think of things in sequential chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that it would definitely be frustrating for some people who are trying to keep the story straight in their heads just for their own, enjoyment of the series itself. But to see
Yeah.
that kind of represented visually and in narratively,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very kind of bold move, I think, for a special episode that's meant to wrap up a character arc, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, like it mixes things up and may get a bit confusing because there were points in time where I was just like, wait, when did that happen exactly in the timeline?
Mm-hmm.
But on the one hand, while it does that and establishes the fact that neither Rue nor Jules are reliable narrators, it also wraps up all the character stuff as well, which I think is
Mm.
just like, I mean, it's just so fun. Like, how do you? Oh man, the writing is just like top notch stuff.
I
Yeah,
I say this a lot in time travel shows, and
yeah,
I know this is not one. This is not a time travel show, but again, I say like the subjectivity and the richness of character detail is more important to me than like figuring out chronology of events. I don't really
absolutely.
care about plot details as long as what the characters do make sense, and I understand how they feel.
Yeah,
And I feel like they've mined Rue and Jules very well, and I'm excited to see where it goes for season two. Okay, last thing that let talk about Euphoria before we move on, right?
yeah.
The climax to actual season one.
Mm.
Boy, a lot of people hated it and a lot of people loved it. what was your opinion on the entire musical sequence that ended season one?
It caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it, right? Like just the kind of way it was shot and all of that. Like as a standalone music video, it would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
How it fits with everything, or how it fits with the episode on its own was kind
Yep.
of strange. Like it
Yeah.
didn't really work. Like okay, it didn't transition into that in a way that I liked, right?
Mm-hmm.
In particular, but I'm willing to give it a pass because, like, hell yeah, we're this deep in already.
Mm.
We've had weird trips already.
Yeah.
I'm here
Yeah.
for it, right? Like, how much of and of course, like, I don't know if we have any Gen Z listeners, but like, how much of the Gen Z experience can be described in a music video like sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? Given that, so much of the things that we have today are just like kind of snippets of that with TikTok and Instagram Live and all of that, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um how much of a Gen Z protagonist's experience can be explained with that?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
I mean, it's interesting. Like, it's a cool way to visually depict Rue's descent into addiction again. Like, with
Yeah.
taking drugs, and then the joy, and the sadness and the bitterness, and everything, like, all
Yeah.
compiled into that musical sequence. I got the emotional
Mm.
uh resonance of it. What it was going for. Yeah, but I do see like why people were confused and or infuriated by the ending. But like, I'm cool. Like, I'm always there. Like, if someone wants to take a big risk and do something out of the norm,
Yeah.
I always say, like, go for it lah. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work lah. But like, I would prefer it if people tried like things differently
Yeah.
more, which is like why I love Noah Hawley, like love and hate Noah Hawley. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's a fair risk, right? Like,
Hmm.
whether people love or hate it, the fact is that sequence does not take away from what a phenomenal season it has been.
Yeah.
Sure, you may or may not love it, but like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it is the last, like, what, minute or so of an
Yeah.
entire season of amazing things that they've given you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think it impacts it that much. Like, I'm not gonna be like, oh my god, seriously, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
uh yeah, and it's I'm glad that they've built a body of work in season one that allows them to take risks like that,
Hmm.
right? That eventually gets us the two special episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, you got Zendaya there. Like, how can you have her there and not sing?
Yeah.
Like, you just might as well lah. Like, last minute, like, hey, go do this music video for us.
Yeah, yeah.
And
We
also, shout out to Labyrinth for doing the entire season's soundtrack. Great
Oh,
stuff, man.
amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Like, I
Mhm.
immediately went to go and track down. I mean, there's a playlist on Spotify, guys. If you do watch Euphoria, like, all the music is compiled there. All of Labyrinth
Mhm.
stuff is also there as well.
Yeah.
But damn, like, it has been. I mean, we've talked about a lot of series that have amazing soundtracks, like, paired with them, right? Like, I think both you and I are a bit of a sucker for
Yeah.
those kind of films or TV shows.
Mhm.
But man, Euphoria really gets it. I really do love it.
Indeed, indeed. I actually think Euphoria has like the second best soundtrack on TV, like next to
mm.
Insecure,
Oh
which is
yeah,
which is also a HBO show, mind you. HBO is killing it.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
guys, if you want to hear, well, not me actually, you want to hear Hit Zero and Shafiq, who is also from Hard Hits as well,
yeah.
talk about Insecure. We have that quite a number of episodes back, right? Where we had
Yeah,
a
yeah.
special episode for that.
It's on our Mixcloud. You can find it. Yeah. I mean, excited because Insecure is like the millennial version of this. Except like we've all grown up
Yeah,
and now we are adulting, and that's what Insecure is, lah. Anyways, let's move on to a couple of Netflix shows.
yeah.
Similarly, let's begin with Mindy Kaling's "Never Have I Ever."
Mm,
I don't know if about you, but I was not. I wouldn't say a fan, but I watched the Mindy Project.
yeah,
And I guess fans of the Mini Project will find her new Netflix series, not new, last year, pretty familiar.
yeah.
The setting has changed from New York to Sherman Oaks, California, but
Mhm.
the main character is still the same. It's a self-absorbed young Indian American woman who unfolds her hilarious self-deprecations like, I got fired from retail. They said my
Yeah.
hands were too sweaty to fold clothes, and stuff like that. And but Culling here has like dug even deeper into her own personal history
Hmm.
to create Never Have I Ever alongside co-creator Lang Fisher.
Yep.
Protagonist Devi is a student at Sherman Oaks High whose family moved to the US from India, just like Culling's did. And an overachiever with her eye on Princeton. She is, smart, of course, but she's still an insecure young girl.
Hmm.
Her mom, played by Purna Jagannathan, is a doctor like Culling's was. Her father recently died of a heart attack, and the trauma over his passing causes, Devi's legs to literally stop working for 3 months as the show begins.
Yep.
What I really enjoyed about Never Have I Ever is I kind of realized when watching this that I've been missing TV rom-coms.
Mm.
And Never Have I Ever, like, during the height of the pandemic when this came out, it made me happier than I had been in weeks. And this was some like pitch perfect teen TV rom-com angst
Yeah.
injected into the comfortable, unshakable framework of a stretched out love triangle teen show dealing with families and friends, and getting your first love and things like that, and tragedy and all of it. It was just like a pitch perfect show that like went for it
Yep.
and really achieved what it wanted.
Hmm.
And it being a Gen Z show, I've never seen like an Indian American teen represented before in
That
a
is true.
TV show.
Hmm.
And that makes it special in and of itself. Like, even if the show wasn't good, but the show is great. You got the show last year, right?
Yeah, I did. It was just one of those things where, oh, I think Sex Education and Never Ever, I kind of had a bit of an overlap, right, in terms of when they came out. So I was just kind of like scrolling through Netflix, and they had obviously the recommended thing. I looked at the trailer. I was like, oh, really? Gen Z, Indian teen girl from family. That's kind of rare. Let's take a look at what was going on. Like you, I'm not a huge fan of the Mindy Kaling project.
Yeah.
But there were moments of it I did enjoy, and I thought, like, okay, if she can capture that within something new like that, like, yeah, sure, why not? So yeah, I did catch it last year. I did enjoy it more than I thought I would, right? Like, I feel like at that point in time, uh there are kind of like expectations that you have for shows like this, right? Like, okay, you're gonna expect awkwardness and kind of humor, and not awkwardness in the pen 15 kind of way, right? Like, what
Yep.
Mindy Kaling's work is like,
Mm-hmm.
and like the kind of humor that she has, and the kind of way that she writes her characters. So there are expectations for that. So I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. For sure, I do think that it's very cute and it's very funny, and a lot of the time, as awkward and as difficult as some of the scenes may be, right? Like, it is all around a very, very feel good
Mm-hmm.
series, right? And that was a big part of the enjoyment while we were in lockdown.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like like the star of the show. I'm gonna butcher her name. I'm gonna try. Matriyayi Ramakrishnan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna call her Devi. Her character's name is Devi.
Yeah.
Like, she's great in the show, and this is her first role ever. Like, looking through her IMDb, like, this is her first legit acting role on screen.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's done like like stage stuff back in her hometown or whatever, of Canada. But like, this is her first real role, and I
Uh-huh.
think she kills it. Like, she is one of the biggest pleasures of the series. None of it would work without Debbie.
For
She is
sure.
such a delightful protagonist. She's this like ideal mixture of kind of understandably selfish as
Hmm.
you were in your age,
Yeah.
kind of self-blind, but also legitimately funny, fundamentally good, and like deeply caring. Like, I understand Devi wants a boyfriend. She wants, her arm hair to thin out. She
Yeah.
knows it's an Indian thing, but it's just quote unquote too much. And she wants to get invited to a party where there's a lot of drugs and alcohol, not so she can get wasted, but because she wants the opportunity to coolly decline. Things like that. I really love. She wants to go to Princeton. She has endearing, thoughtful friends. Ramona Young as Eleanor, and Lee Rodriguez as Fabiola.
Fantastic stuff.
Ramona Young, obviously from Legends of Tomorrow, we already
Uh-huh.
loved her.
Yeah.
They are ridiculously sweet, and they get plenty of time to establish themselves as fully realized characters too.
Hmm.
Eventually their needs become important plot points that help balance out the attention on Devi.
Yeah.
And part of the show's strengths is I think like Devi doesn't realize that the world doesn't revolve around her. Like, her
Hmm.
friends have their own issues too,
Yeah.
and at certain points she kind of like abandons them. Her mother is fantastic.
Oh,
I've never
yes.
heard of her. Purna Jagannathan, but she is great as this like loving and supportive
She
mother.
was
But
in
she doesn't.
Rami, right?
She was in Rami.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, she's the wife. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah. I
was
mean,
mhm.
she's great, but like she doesn't click well with her daughter, often like misunderstanding or misreading her and setting expectations
Yep.
that Devi chaves against, and I love that Devi's Indianness is a vital part of the show. It's not like an aesthetic, it's not
Mhm.
background
Yep.
noise.
Yep.
It's both in the way that it shapes Devi's story and in the way that Never Have I Ever plays into the rom-com genre
Yeah.
and the way it melts into being Indian. Like being Indian affects every aspect of Devi's life, and it feeds into her mother's expectations, while her cousin Kamala, like the absolutely like attractive Richa Mujani lives in their house. It means that Devi has to attend long, boring Indian holiday celebrations she'd rather skip, despite the fact that they look really fun.
Yeah.
It changes the way that Devi and her mother deal with the grief they're both trying to grapple with. Sometimes Devi forgets that her mother is sad too.
Mhm.
It makes Never Have I Ever, I think, purposefully happily different from the previous white kids in the white neighborhood team rom-com suburbia default.
Yep. Yep. For
It's
sure.
all it's a defining, all pervasive facet of what the show is. Like that's the big one. Like Devi and her Indianness is what
Mm.
makes Never Have I Ever special.
Yep. And John McEnroe.
And John McEnroe, oh my god, I haven't watched the show in a year, so I totally forgot that John McEnroe is the narrator of the show.
I love it.
Um,
It's so good.
famous tennis star John McEnroe, who great tennis player by the way, but more better known for his outbursts on the court where he attacks umpires with tennis rackets and shit. Somehow is for some reason is the narrator of the show, and from like the first minute where I laughed, and then like okay, then I totally bought it. Yeah, John McEnroe is part of the show. I don't know why until the final episode, of course, but I don't know why. But John McEnroe is there,
Yeah.
and it works.
And it
And
totally works. I love the fact there's this whole meta thing where John has the opportunity in a teen rom com,
yeah,
right? A Gen Z teen rom com to talk about his outbursts and what was going through his mind at that point in time.
mm-hmm.
Right, like, and him becoming kind of like this imaginary mentor figure in place of Davy's father is just an
Yeah,
amazing twist that I did not see coming. Right, like
mm-hmm.
what a strange, like eccentric choice of writing that is, but it works. It totally works, and I'm quite enamored by that relationship. It's quite funny.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Any like concluding thoughts about Never Have I Ever before we move on to sex education?
I really did enjoy this. I do have to say though that I think the way that the season ended didn't really quite have me wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
It felt quite self-contained, all in all, right? Like the characters are fun and they grow throughout the entire thing, but I don't think because it's a rom-com, right? Like it didn't have significant enough conflict for me to want to see a continuation of their story,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah. It works really well as a mini series. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like I'm assuming season 2 is coming out. Like if it does, I'll give it a shot. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it's going to be good. I just can't think of where they go from here.
Yeah, I mean, like, unless they kind of like graduate David to college and all of that, like, I don't know how much more it would change up. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically my kind of reservation for that. But I thoroughly enjoyed this, the entire season of it, just because it's just really cute and really fun, right? Like, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something a bit rare, I think, these days, without delving into like Riverdale territory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, yeah. Definitely a strong recommend if you're lacking some team rom com in your life. Uh.
Definitely, man. Yeah. And next up, also on Netflix, which has a lot of good teen shows.
Hmm.
It's Sex Education, currently in its second season. I think it's going into its third soon.
Yeah.
It's a sweet and sexy Netflix series that is kind of the anti 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
It stars Gillian Anderson. I mean, if you love Gillian
Oh
Anderson
my
as Margaret
god.
Thatcher, which I did, I
Yeah.
can't think of a more different role for her.
Uh huh.
And this show is great, and I think like sometimes it's refreshing to see a story that strips away the pretenses and embraces the truth. That human beings, like so many other animals and living species, are sexual creatures and they like to have sex. It doesn't mean that they're automatically good at it and they know what they want or they know how to get it. But that fundamental drive like thrums through every minute of Sex Education,
Yeah.
while also never compromising its sweet and eccentric cast of characters. At the center of the show is Otis, played by Asa Butterfield, who is a
Mm.
16-year-old high school student living in some truly idyllic British countryside, whose sexual awakening has yet to really begin.
Yep.
What makes his home life with single mother Jean, played by Gillian Anderson, complicated is that she's a practicing sex and relationship therapist
Uh
who uses the most embarrassing nomenclature possible to describe,
huh.
like X, her son can barely even begin to imagine committing, right?
Yeah.
Like, however, living as he does with his mom, his enterprising classmate, Maeve, played by Emma Mackey, Ava Margot Robbie,
Yeah.
notices that, like, he's picked up a lot of her mother's teachings, a lot of his mother's teachings, and encourages him to start his own quote unquote sex clinic, charging his fellow students for advice on their romantic interests. So he
Hmm.
himself becomes his mother's profession, an amateur sex psychologist.
Yeah.
A great show created by Laurie Nunn. I think this is one of the most refreshing shows that Netflix debuted back in 2018.
Yeah.
How about you? How did you discover the show, and what do you think about it?
Again, I think it was just one of those things when did it come out again? Was it 2019?
Uh, I think it was 2018 or
Yes. Yeah,
January
January
2019.
2019. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that I saw on the trailers, right, for Netflix kind of recommendation. I saw Gillian Anderson in some awkward moments there with
Hmm.
her son. I was like, okay, cool, let's give it this a shot. I the premise itself is interesting, right? And like it's a great kind of setup for so much comedy, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I just kind of started on that. Yeah, by and large, I enjoyed it a great deal. I think like the characters are interesting, the premise is interesting, the way that things play out, uh, kind of tropish to a certain extent, but still like all within like kind of good humor and all of that. I do have to
Hmm.
say, however, that I feel like the Otis character,
Hmm.
and Asa Butterfield's performance of it nearing the end of season one and going into season two, right, felt so like he's like the Michael Sarah of this generation,
Hmm.
if you get what I mean, right? Like you got this whole like awkward boy kind of situation, slightly like not slightly like self-absorbed and highly annoying at various points in time, which is
Hmm.
understandable for the story. But there were points in time where he's just like an incredibly dislikable character within his
Mm.
own story, which is fine. But yeah, that was just one of the things that kind of like rubbed me a bit wrong. Like I feel like his character at the beginning of season one, or for most of season one, was something that I was a lot more taken by,
Hmm.
especially his relationship with Maeve before things kind of get like really complicated.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but it becomes messy because teen drama is messy, right?
Hmm.
For that sake, and there are occasional lapses where the narrative becomes messy as well, which I don't
Hmm.
think necessarily needs to be the case. Like the situation can be messy, the narrative doesn't need to become that, right?
Mm.
Where the storytelling kind of like drops off, especially
Season two.
season two.
Yeah.
The majority of the first half of season two felt that way until things
Hmm.
get resolved.
Hmm.
And I think that's pretty much my only criticism of it. By and large, still an extremely enjoyable watch. I really, really do love Gillian Anderson's character and the way she just plays off everything.
Hmm.
And oh man, what's her current lover's name? The European guy.
In real life.
No, no, no. As in like
Oh, in the
yeah, in
show.
the show. Like uh
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. Yeah, the plumber guy.
Can't remember either. Plumber guy. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. There's so much like comedy there, and they mind the shit out of it, and
Mm.
it's so good that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, one of the best things about this show is the fact that I think like so many of the characters do feel like kids.
Yeah.
They're not hyper articulate young adults. Who, like, a lot of teen shows present kids as like basically walking quip machines. Like
Mm.
they're written by adults to seem like adults. But these kids are kids, they're scrambling teenagers who don't really know how they feel about anything.
Yeah.
They just know that they feel it. They don't know what it is, and all that said, like, at the same time, the adults don't seem to have things any more figured out than the kids.
Mm.
As largely kind of represented, as you mentioned, by Jean, whose avoidance of real relationships at first, in favor of casual sex, serves as a primary storyline. Like that, and finding new ways to embarrass Otis, like, kind of compromise like the majority of the show's
Yep.
humor.
Yep.
Yeah, but it does allow like Gillian Anderson, I guess, to stretch in different ways than the X Files or the Crown,
Yep.
and stuff like that. And again, though, like this is a kid's story
It
with the
is.
fluctuation in both friendships and relationships, picking back and forth with like this very youthful verve.
Mm-hmm.
Sex education does a lot of things really well. Chief amongst them is the creation of a high school world that feels fully developed,
Yep.
realistic to a degree,
Mm-hmm.
but like not totally realistic, but just like the John Hughesness of it. It's enough to enable a sense of escapism.
Yeah.
The soundtrack uses just enough eclectic 80s tracks to enable that feeling, while at the same time, like there's a certain timelessness about the show
Mm-hmm.
because you're quite unable to pinpoint when this takes place.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Like
sure.
the set design, costuming, and everything kind of feels it could have been in the 80s, could have been in the 90s, could have been in 2020. I don't know, and I think that's kind of like it's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah. It's part
It's
of the
a
charm.
it's a timeless classic thing.
Yeah.
Like, and there's a fair amount of playing with classic tropes as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are jocks and nerds and princesses and freaks and outcasts are all represented all over the course of the series,
Yeah.
and I like that they've developed it into this very sweet and likable
Yeah.
ensemble. It's reminiscent of like other good teen shows in the past,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps like my only criticism is similar to Isa, in the fact that like kind of it does drop off a little bit in season 2 before it picks up again.
Yep.
And also like it doesn't quite feel like Britain.
Yes.
That's about it, lah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It doesn't quite feel. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yep.
And of course, like going into in my skin. Of course, we'll talk a bit more about that and compare that a
Mm-hmm.
bit. But just shout out to Eric and
Mm.
Lily, who are
Mm.
the strangest characters on this show of like a host of strange characters, but so well fleshed out. Like Eric is my favorite character by far, and his story is so compelling. I think a lot of his drama and his own kind of like personal struggle, coming to terms with his sexuality
Mm-hmm.
and his relationships within a largely white cis school,
Yep.
is like extremely compelling, and it carries the show through its slump
Mm-hmm.
for sure, right? And then as kind of like an additional thing, like Lily's character as this erotica writing alien
Yeah.
alien girl is just like, it is bizarre to the nth degree and extremely enjoyable to watch. But yeah,
Yep.
shout out to those two characters in particular. I feel like it is so important, especially with or what we've talked about in Euphoria, to have representation like that, where the characters are they are quirky and they are real at the same time, right? And they have
Mm-hmm.
like, they're not just there as gay best friend,
Mm-hmm.
they're not just there as new trans girl. Like to have that kind of like development is so important, because it like deepens the story so much. So, and I think in season 2 of Sex Education, with the slump off with like Maeve and Otis's kind of like strangeness, them going on with his girlfriend and all of that, like that slump really gets carried by Eric's story, right? And I think that um is kind of important, because like when the straight white male kind of like goes through his shit phase, like we have good characters to kind of like see us through that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, just shout out to Eric and his impeccable sense of style.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think overall, like sex education, as I mentioned, is very refreshing because there's this innate sweetness that comes with the message that yeah, while one 16-year-old might be ready for sex, another might not be, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's blunt in this depiction of sexuality, whether cis or whether gay.
Mm-hmm.
And it also proves incredibly fond of its characters, a feeling that's passed down to the viewers.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very wholeheartedly wholesome show. Surprising to say, because it builds itself as this very like raunchy comedy,
Yeah.
but in a way it's not at
Yeah.
all. It's a very emotionally insightful show about physical aspects that people should be more open and frank about.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's to me it's like the anti 13 Reasons Why, which is such a garbage show. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is it. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about In My Skin, coming out of Wales. While Sex Education doesn't feel particularly, like it doesn't quite have a sense of place,
Yeah.
in terms of like I can't tell what country this is,
Mm-hmm.
although it's obviously Britain. In My Skin is hyper specific. It is
Mm.
so clearly Wales, that I love the hyper specificity of it, lah.
Yep.
To break it down, like it stars this girl named Bethan, who isn't the most popular girl in her school and
Hmm.
in her secondary school, and she's not the most athletic or glamorous, but she seems quite clever. She's not much, making much of an academic impact either, but
Yeah.
there's one thing that she is better at than anyone else. If even if none of her friends or family are aware of it, she's an incredible liar.
Mm.
This is the talented Mr. Ripley if it was a teen show.
Yeah.
It's a very quick watch. It's coming out of Wales, BBC Wales. It's a 5 episode season. It's a British coming of age import. It's called In My Skin, and we see that the entire existence of Bethan is built around a series of elaborate, relentless, interlocking secrets and lies and
Mm.
falsehoods.
Hmm.
Like she spends every minute she can with her friends Lydia and Travis, and neither of them have the first idea that her mother Katrina like struggles with bipolar disorder
Yeah.
and has to be periodically institutionalized, and that her father Dilwyn is a useless, terrifying drunk. And that it's her responsibility for keeping her mother alive and her household running. Basically, falls entirely on her shoulders.
Yeah.
She befriends with the school kind of Queen Poppy by pretending to be a fellow rich girl, keeping Poppy, from seeing the squalor in which she really lives in, by explaining that her house is closed to visitors while her new conservatory is being built. She has an excuse for every occasion, and even when teachers can tell that she's lying, none of them come close to suspecting, kind of the sad and lonely truth of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like this is what I mean by it's like the talented Mr. Ripley if it was a teen girl. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. What do you think about In My Skin? This very like very tiny, very small like show.
Uh, l- okay. So like I was telling Hits just before we started recording this, I think it was a bit of a waste for me to have watched Euphoria, binged
Mm,
Euphoria before going to In My Skin, right? Just because comparatively in such a short time span, with all the teen drama that I've had to consume over the last 2 weeks, like it did feel a lot more muted, right? And the hyper specificity of Wales against like the very clearly American
mm,
tone of Euphoria was a bit of a shock, I think, for me. But that is not to say that I did not enjoy In My Skin. It is inventive and quiet in its own
mm,
way, uh, much like the much like the town I think that it takes place in, right? Like it has its own kind of like quiet drama behind closed doors. And that is very indicative of the series as a whole. The great thing is, as the audience, we get to see behind those closed doors and
yeah.
see like the very, very human struggles, right?
Mm,
I mean, like it sounds cliche. You've got a mother suffering from mental depression and a drunk dad, right?
mm,
Umpteen million teen shows kind of like deal with that, but I think the
mm,
hyper specificity of um a Welsh high school and
mm,
the way that it plays out with just Bethan's propensity for lying, and kind
mm,
of like hiding the truth and dancing around it, makes a very, very interesting story, right?
mm,
Like that is very difficult to kind of pry yourself away from, in a totally different way from Euphoria, mind you.
yep.
Um, and I don't know if it's a vested interest on my part to see what happens if and when she gets caught,
Mm-hmm.
or whether or not I'm just like in my seat just trying to see what the next excuse she's gonna give is, because some of them are just like straight up far out, like really that's the best you
Mm-hmm.
could do.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like there's so much at stake, with the way that her life is constructed,
Yeah.
and her lies are well-meaning to a large extent, I think,
Mm-hmm.
more than losing face or like being afraid of the bullying and all of that. Like I think it really is about protecting her loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
more so than anything else. Even though they do go through some very obvious kind of like imagination sequences where she's worried about being teased and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, right, the drama that happens in the home and in the mental ward and
Mm,
really is quite something. And to juxtapose that to kind of the drama that's going on in school, like it
mm,
really, like school seems so much of a game, right? Like in
mm-hmm.
comparison to the realness that she has to come home to every day.
Yeah, yeah. We could, I guess, speculate or like say lah that like In My Skin, as opposed to the other three shows that we've mentioned,
Yeah.
is probably the grittiest or most grounded or most realistic show of the bunch.
Yes.
There is no instance of privilege in here, lah. Like
Mm.
Bethan can't afford to do any of the things any of the other kids in the other shows do. You know,
Yep.
she just doesn't have the money for it. She doesn't have the parents. She doesn't have a house and things like that. You know, it is. It does not lack for grit. It is candid in almost everything in the way
Yep.
that its heroine is terrified to be. Like it never flinches from the harsh or overwhelming reality of having to be, a parent's caretaker or
Mm-hmm.
what it's supposed in what is supposed to be a carefree age.
Yep.
And the young actress that plays her is superb and has a face that tells us so much. Even
Mm.
as her mouth is spinning one fantasy after another to people who would actually kind of gladly help her if she wasn't so afraid of them learning her secrets.
Yeah.
The series is so unsparing that it's kind of positioning as a dark comedy often feels more a nod to its length than the actual amount of humor because it is more dark than comedy.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, there is like slight comic pitching here and there, but not really. Like it's more of a dark drama more than a dark comedy, more of a dark half-hour drama. And it's
Yep.
it's quite a good one in terms of exploring Beffin's skin, lah.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon the pun.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's a blanket darkness to the series that makes it a lot more grown up and realistically so.
Yep.
The way that she spins various plates, which are obviously on a collision course, that the audience can see, but she can't.
Yep.
It builds an incredible amount of tension, which is why I shockingly I found the show out of nowhere. I heard some people in like nobody in like the TV critic circles were talking about In My Skin. It was just like this little show out of Wales. I caught it. I thought, okay, let like spend some time watching the first episode. So I set aside a couple of hours from it. Like little did I know that 2 hours was all I needed to go through the entire season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
5 episodes, half an hour each. Like it's a very, very quick watch. I wish it was a bit longer. Actually, I feel like they could have fleshed out a few more things there, but like because of how condensed it is timing wise, like some of the drama is definitely heightened. I think
Hmm.
her confrontation with her mother during her manic sequences are some of the
Hmm.
most harrowing I've seen.
Yeah.
And like very visceral, very harrowing, and like Gabrielle Crevy's kind of performance as Bethan as she's on the receiving end of those, like wow, her face is just like amazing stuff.
Hmm.
Just to see her have to go through that, and it feels extremely real. And kind of very close to home for people who have friends or family or loved ones who suffer from bipolar disorder or manic depression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, sh- um, I don't know. Are they confirmed for a season two? Actually,
I think they are, but like the deal was like it was supposed to air on BBC Wales and BBC Free, and then in 2020 Hulu picked it up.
ah,
So they were because of its success on Hulu,
yep,
that's why it was greenlit for a season two. Whereas prior it wasn't. So they
yep.
are going back to make season two now, like despite the fact that it's been 3 years already.
Okay, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but because an American audience discovered it on Hulu like very recently, it was just picked up. Like it was like, oh, okay, let's do another one.
Hmm. Okay, okay. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I'm interested to kind of see where they go with this, right? Because there's a lot of promise more than
Hmm.
anything else. I think there are a few key moments within this very short kind of like 2.5 hours that you put time into that are, are are incredible and very promising, right? Like there is so much more that In My Skin could possibly give us,
Hmm.
that they already more than they already have, and I'm interested to see that. And
Yeah.
of course, like with the kind of cliffhanger that he ended on, like I mean, how can we not get a season two, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting it's a very interesting kind of like study into like dealing with familial drama with addiction and mental illness in a vastly different way from Euphoria, balanced
Hmm.
with this whole kind of like teen drama with the lying and the school life. I don't think I've seen a combination of that anytime recently that is this
Hmm.
compelling, and again,
Yeah.
like it is, like you said, it is dark in its own way but also extremely subtle and quiet and powerful at the same time, which is just like, yeah, why not? Give it a shot. I understand that it hasn't been picked up by a lot of people and incredibly underrated. Uh, but I enjoyed it. I was very taken by some of the performances they had here. So
Yeah.
why not
Yeah.
give it a shot?
Same here, man. Like you can find it on the BBC iPlayer, on Hulu if you're living in America, of course.
Yep.
And that wraps it up for our modern teen show discussion. Really enjoyed it. Like, are there any other modern teen shows in your mind that we missed out on?
Ooh, um, I don't know. What was the one? Oh, was that the show? Ah, the one with Leia M. Lewis.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
Uh, let me see. Let me see. Let me see. The half of it.
Mm.
The half
Well,
of it
it's a film,
is
but
a
yeah,
film.
yeah, that
Yeah.
counts. Yeah.
I really really enjoyed the half of it. Very interesting, kind of like friendship that it explores, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a very, very kind of like deep exploration of a platonic kind of friendship between two unlikely friends.
Yeah.
Um, Probably like the Americanized film version of what Horror Mia probably is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. I really did. I think like Liam Lewis and what's the guy's name? I can't remember the other male co-star is but like such a beautiful kind of like exploration of a very unusual relationship, I think, given this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the more memorable ones of recent times.
Yeah. Yeah, and in encapsulating that also, like we've already reviewed this, but if you're talking movies, you gotta watch Booksmart.
Oh yeah.
Probably I think our second or third episode ever,
Yep.
I still think that Booksmart is like the defining like teen comedy for Gen Z.
Yep.
And like nothing has showed up that has made me change my mind. It still is.
For sure. Booksmart was great. I mean, go check out the episode where we kind of talk about that. I think we talk about it quite at length.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
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 yeah, definitely, man.
2019.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks, so we'll be talking about very naturalistic slice
Mm.
of life films. Films that feel like someone just put like a spy cam on the wall, and you're just watching things. Like slice of life. Like in this, like it's different from the Japanese anime version of slice of
Yeah,
life.
for sure.
Which like basically in Japan it just means like non-genre.
Uh-huh.
Whereas in this one it kind of depicts mundane experiences in arts and entertainment.
Yeah.
Where it kind of refers to the naturalism of the scenes. It's a narrative technique lah, whereby like these arbitrary sequence of events in a character's life is presented, often lacking plot, often lacking conflict, often lacking exposition, and having an open ending. And I love these kinds of films. It's something that there's some things that I've like grown to like.
Yeah.
It's something that like maybe when I was younger I avoided because I was a very plot driven person at first,
Uh-huh.
and then I became a character driven person. And naturally, when you become a character driven kind of like, if that becomes your forte, then slice of life is the ultimate character driven story.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Like yeah, without any plot kind of thing. Yes. Also known as our Chloe Zhao special.
Mm. Yeah, we'll be talking about Nomadland. We'll be talking about The Rider, which I feel is superior. I know a lot of people disagree, but I think The Rider is Chloe Zhao's better film. A
Yeah.
Japanese movie called Shoplifters, and Sean Baker's The
Uh,
Florida
yeah,
Project.
yeah, which you have been a huge fan of for quite a while, if I remember.
Yeah.
So I'll be the one hopping on the bandwagon for that. Very
Mm-hmm.
excited to talk about this. I think like with Chloe Zhao's kind of recent stint in the limelight, like super excited to kind of talk about both the Rider and Nomadland as well.
Definitely, man. Yeah. Till next time, this has been Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye,
Ciao.
guys.